Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of this guy. I can't remember what I'm calling the podcast. Oh, Learn American English with this guy. Yes, episode 5. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Ooh, there's another idiom for you. Roll off the tongue. It means it's not easy to say. So welcome back to episode 5 of Learn American English with this guy. I think that's what it's called. So in this episode, I talk all about social media. I go over 7 different kinds of social media. And I don't think it's just in the United States. I'm sure most people have this around the world. But I wanted to talk about a topic that a lot of people would be familiar with, but they would hear it in slow English. So hopefully that will help you get to the level of English that you want. I do mention a couple different idioms, and I will leave those in the show notes. But I mention back in the day, which means, I go over it in the podcast, but it just means, not right now, not present day, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Back in the day, I talk about, this is my sweet spot. This is my jam. This is what some American people will say if they are really comfortable with something. Like, I think it comes from music, like the jam spot. Like, oh yeah, this is my jam. It means it's a song that you know or you really like or you listen to maybe back in the day. But that's my jam. And some people say it ironically, like they don't really mean it. Like, that's my jam. Could be like trying to be funny. I talk about, for a minute, how that means it doesn't last very long. Like, and I think I say it with Musical.ly, like, oh, Musical.ly, that app. Yeah, that only lasted a minute. So it's not literally a minute, but I don't know, maybe a year or two. Didn't last too long. So, thanks for listening again. And, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it helps. Please leave any kind of comments that will help out the podcast. Let me help you, all that stuff. So again, thank you very much for listening. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, what I would like to do in slow English is talk about some of the social media that is popular in the United States. So, of course, since the world is so connected, it's probably pretty much the same in most parts of the world, but I will do it from my perspective as kind of an older guy. And I imagine if you are listening to this podcast, if you're trying to learn English, you're probably, I would say, younger than me, probably in your 20s or your 30s. But maybe I'm just assuming too much. So, back in the day, and that's an idiom that you might not be familiar with. Back in the day, it just means not now. Probably doesn't mean 100 years ago, but back in the day, like in my lifetime, maybe 10 years ago or so. But back in the day, social media started out with MySpace. And that was pretty big for a while. I remember I had an account maybe back in 2004. I didn't do any research for this, but I think that was kind of the first piece of social media that was available. And I remember everybody had a friend, Tom. That was the first friend you got. I think it was the creator of MySpace, but everybody got one friend at least to start out with, and his name was Tom. So that lasted actually quite a while, I think maybe 5 years. And then along came Facebook. And if you're my age, Facebook, I think, is the thing that most people will use for social media. I mean, my mom even has a Facebook account. And we just finished with the Christmas holiday. And I think instead of sending out Christmas cards, people just check each other's Facebook. That back in the day, that was a big thing, is you sent Christmas cards so everyone could see how your family changed. Now, everybody just has Facebook. So I think the Christmas cards that friends send to each other is kind of dwindling or getting less each year. Not as many Christmas cards going around. But to use another couple idioms here, Facebook is my sweet spot. Facebook is my jam. Some people will say that in the United States. Sweet spot, that's my jam. That means like you are very comfortable with it. Like that is what makes you happy. So hopefully those two idioms will be useful for you. Oh, that's my sweet spot. Or, oh, this is my jam. Meaning, yep, I like this kind of stuff. I believe next came Twitter. And I had a Twitter account at one time, but I've forgotten my password. So I had like 800 followers on there for some reason. Maybe a lot of them were bots, but bots. That might be a term you're not familiar with, but just a bot, B-O-T, a bot. Like a fake account created by some kind of spam person. Spam is probably used all around the world now. Spam, fake. Twitter, our president in the United States, I definitely won't get into politics, but that is his main vehicle for spreading information, I guess. I think Twitter's pretty good for news, pretty worldwide. It's pretty simple, gets right to the point, limits the number of characters you can have. So I think Twitter is good. If I remember my password ever, I will get back on Twitter, but don't have Twitter. The next one, and I do have this, is Instagram. Great for sharing pictures with your friends. And that was about the last item for social media that I got on board with. Ooh, that might be another idiom. Got on board with. Like that I actually participated in. The next couple that I'm going to talk about, I think that's mostly for younger people. And I think you can figure out how old a person is depending on which social media they use. So like if Facebook is your jam, you're probably in your 30s or older, I would think. But any younger, I don't think people use Facebook. Instagram, maybe I think my mom, who is in her 70s, does not have an Instagram. So maybe if you have an Instagram, you're maybe 40 or older. Ooh, I'm just spitballing. That's another idiom, spitballing. It's another way to say, I'm just guessing. I'm just spitballing here. The next one I think that came along, and I definitely did not get on board with this. I definitely did not sign up for this, was Musical.ly. I remember my kids for a minute, if I want to use another idiom, for a minute. My kids were on Musical.ly for a minute. That just means like for a short time. Another way to say a short time. So I think my kids who are 12 and 13, I think they had Musical.ly, but I don't think they have it anymore. I think that was one of those, I don't even know if it was social media, actually. I think you could have your friends on there and send probably inappropriate videos to each other, but Musical.ly, I think that's gone now. Snapchat, that might have come before Musical.ly. I'm not sure. Snapchat, I believe that is still pretty big with my students and I think my daughter has a Snapchat, but my son doesn't. And I think that's kind of like the Facebook for teenagers, or maybe for people in their 20s. Snapchat. And the last one, which I don't know anything about, but I know a lot of people are on board with that, and that's TikTok. TikTok. Oh, and you can use snap as a verb. Like, hey, I'm going to snap my friend real quick. meaning like I'm going to send them a message on Snapchat right now, something like that. I'm going to send my friend a snap real quick. Like, I'm old. I don't even think I'm using that right. But so snap can be a verb, but sometimes in class, just to make my students cringe a little bit, cringe. That's another idiom. Oh, that's cringy. It means like, oh, that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Ooh, that's another. That gives me the creeps. Cringe. Ooh, that's a little cringy. TikTok. You can't say, hey, I'm going to tick my friend tonight, or I'm going to talk my friend tonight. So that does not work. Don't use tick or talk as a verb. You can use snap, though. Hey, I'm going to snap you real quick. I think means I will send them a message on Snapchat. And the Snapchats disappear, don't they? I don't think they last for very long. But I'm sure you could screenshot. I think you get a message if you screenshot somebody, though. But like if they send a picture and you take a screenshot, I think that person knows that you have screenshotted them. So be careful of that. I'm sure you guys know more about this than I do, but I'm just trying to speak slowly in English on a topic. So good luck with your snaps and your TikToks and your Musical.lys and your tweets and all that stuff. And I hope, again, that this podcast was helpful and maybe you learned something new as far as the idioms go, like back in my day or back in the day, or, oh, that's my jam, it's my sweet spot, or, oh, that only lasted for a minute. It doesn't literally mean it lasted for a minute, but it means it lasted for a short time. So, yeah, like I said, hope you enjoyed this. Leave me a message. Give me ideas. Thank you for listening.